It's been more than 70 years after World War II, and Europe again has a Nazi problem. It again has this growing right-wing stench in that part of the world. Since about the middle part of the second decade of the 21st century, around about 2014, 2015, there had been growing right-wing extremism, particularly in the east of that continent. And what's fascinating is that a lot of this indoctrination, particularly of young people, is coming through fan associations of football clubs. They're known as ultras, ultra fans, and they often have very hard right-wing racist ideology. And as I've spoken before on another show, even the image of Janusz Waluś, the man who killed Chris Hani, has been used as a symbol for particularly the Polish right wing at football games in the past, with fans displaying his image at stadiums. And it's a very, very real reality in a increasingly polarized world. But people are doing something about it. Rafał Pankowski is the founder and the spokesperson of the Never Again Association. We're talking next about how do we build bridges between communities through sport and football, not only fixing the issue in Poland, Eastern Europe, but also around the world. Professor Rafał Pankowski joins me now. Rafał, thanks so much for talking to us again. We've had this discussion previously on another show where you told us about how the image of Janusz Waluś is used in certain sectors of Polish football fan groups as an almost tribute to his dastardly deeds here in South Africa. But how has particularly COVID-19, the gathering of groups, the gathering of fans at stadiums, what has that had? What impact has that had on right-wing organizations, formalizing and meeting during this time?
Hello, Lester. It is nice to talk again. Well, you are right. The image of Janusz Waluś became a kind of symbol for some of those extreme far right groups that have been visible and present in several Polish football clubs. And of course, when the pandemic happened, games were suspended, or later they were played without supporters. And then I think in many different spheres of life, we could hope that people would change their ways, and the post-pandemic reality would be different, would be better. Unfortunately, when the fans were allowed back into the stadiums in Poland last summer, we saw that some of those problems unfortunately returned too. So again, we saw banners and pictures of Janusz Waluś in some places, including in the stadium in Gdańsk, which is an important city, and it is the birthplace of the Solidarity movement, and it is actually the stadium that was built for the Euro 2012 European Championships. So which was a positive event. So unfortunately, we see a lot of those problems from before the pandemic are coming back, and I think there is still a lot of sort of challenging situations and issues that we are facing, both in football and in society, of course, related to xenophobia, related to right-wing extremism, and also to racism.
Rafał, over the last few weeks, we've seen growing fan movements for, I would say, a positive cause. We had the formation of what was going to be known as the European Super League, essentially brought down by fan organizations saying, we can't have owners dictate. Owners who aren't even, members of society. They're just literally business people, foreign business people, making decisions on behalf of fans. It's really grown into a really positive movement, with fan solidarity. How do you use that fan solidarity then to create an anti-racism message? Racism, in particularly football in Europe, still a major concern. In my opinion, not necessarily anything constructive being done from, the leadership of UEFA, of FIFA. Is this not an opportunity for fans to take control of the situation, say, we won't allow right-wing narratives into this public game, this universal game of football?
I completely agree. I think the fan groups, the fan movement, can play and often plays a very positive role in building solidarity, in supporting different progressive causes. I think we have a lot of examples of solidarity with refugees, for example, organized by football fans in Germany or in Italy or other countries. So football can be a platform for some very positive ideas and initiatives. It's a little more problematic in the east of Europe, as you mentioned. So the culture of football seems more strongly influenced and infiltrated by right-wing and nationalist ideology. So there is a subtle cultural divide within football in Western Europe on the one side, and Central and Eastern Europe on the other side. But I think what you also mentioned, the role of the leadership of international football is also very crucial. And one of the things that I would say went mostly unnoticed in international media was a recent election to the position of UEFA vice president. And the person I'm talking about is Zbigniew Boniek, the leader, the chairman of the Polish Football Association.
And this was when Poland and England played. England players took the knee, Polish players didn't. The knee in solidarity of Black Lives Matter.
That was exactly recently, in just a few weeks ago, when Mr. Boniek, as the chairman of the Polish FA, spoke publicly and very openly against the Black Lives movement and against the gesture of solidarity. And in the end, the Polish players were pressurized not to participate in it, which was also a gesture, but a very unfortunate one, I would say. But Boniek has a long history of xenophobic, homophobic, sexist statements. So to promote him to the position of vice president of UEFA is it's very problematic. It really raises questions.
It's as much as of a message of how UEFA is going in dealing with racism in the sport. But the Never Again Association formed, I think it was in the mid-90s. It was a response to remember the effects of right-wing nationalism that has gripped Europe for some time now. But you also have a strong South African connection. I know that you've worked here in this country and you've used some of the lessons of reconciliation here, transposing it to Polish society.
Absolutely. I think that, paradoxically, those two countries are quite distant from each other if you look at the map, but they have a lot in common. They really have a lot in common, including the freedom movement in the 80s that eventually succeeded in transforming the country. The whole challenge of the democratic transformation, which was peaceful. I think that is something that we also have in common, and among other things, what I think is really interesting, if you look at both Poland and South Africa, is the issue of diversity, social and cultural diversity. Poland today is not a very diverse country, but historically it has been very diverse, especially before and until World War II and the Holocaust, and it was one of the centers of one of the main centers of Jewish culture and Jewish life. But of course there is a lot of history that we can bring up here, such as the migration of Jews from the historic territory of Poland to South Africa that happened a lot in the beginning of the 20th century, and of course Joe Slovo, for example, is one of the famous people who came from that background. And there are more stories, such as the participation of South African pilots in trying to help and to drop supplies for the Warsaw Uprising in 1944, which is still remembered in Poland.
Rafal, you talk about these cultural markers between South Africa and Poland, and there is a quirk in the South African lexicon that words just stick. We have a name for the sausage that we sell on every street corner, butchery, every takeaway outlet. In South Africa, we call it the Russian. And the reason we call it the Russian is that when Polish migrants moved and migrated to South Africa, they brought with them the Polish kielbasa sausage. Of course. In terms of our South Africanness, we did not know the difference between a Polish immigrant and a Russian immigrant. And to this day, South Africans have been calling the Polish kielbasa a Russian. And I find that very, very interesting in terms of the migration of particularly Jewish people from Eastern Europe to South Africa and forming such a close-knit part of South African culture and the South African community.
Well, of course, the biggest part of former Poland at that time was a part of the Russian Empire, so that can be understandable. But that's a very interesting detail, and I'm sure it's one of many that we could discover, and I think it's a very interesting book to be written about the historic links and the parallels between Poland and South Africa in the 20th century, especially. I can give you just one more example again from the history of football. So there was a game in Kraków in 1991. It was Wisła Kraków, which is a big Polish club, one of the oldest Polish football clubs. And that game was historic because apparently it included the first player of African origin playing in the Polish league. His name was Noel Sikosana, and some sources say he was originally from Zimbabwe, but some other sources say he was from the Republic of South Africa. And I think for thousands of those Polish fans who gathered at the stadium, it was probably the first ever opportunity to see an African, in their whole lives. And again, I think many of them would remember it, and I think it's again just one of many examples showing the potential of a game like football in building bridges, in bringing people together, in breaking down stereotypes and prejudice. So there are two sides to football, two sides to the coin here. It can be a platform for something negative, but it can also be a platform for something positive in society.
Rafal, I'm always struck by the interconnectedness of people. Ian from Tableview just messaged into our show right now and said, "My dad was a pilot for the South African Air Force 31 Squadron, dropping supplies for Warsaw in 1944. There is a great interconnectedness between all people around the world. But Professor Rafał Pankowski, spokesperson for the Never Again movement, best of luck. Hopefully one day we'll meet and talk, and we can write that book about the interconnected history and its effects on football and sausages in South Africa.
That's a brilliant idea.
Professor Rafał Pankowski, spokesperson for the Never Again Association anti-racism movement in Warsaw, Poland. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Morning Review. And that is it for our second hour.